my journey has not really been linear. It hasn't been the typical, I think, traditional abstinence or sobriety journey. What worked for me in year 1 and then what's been working for me and now it's starting year 7 are completely different. But I feel like evolution is necessary in recovery.
All right, Sober Stories crew, I guess we should start recording this. Kayla and I have been catching up for the last 20 minutes, which I guess is the benefit and then also the problem of recording a podcast with a friend. But Kayla, welcome to Sober Stories.
Hello. I feel like...
How's your day going?
It's long. It's been long, but good. I'm glad. I was like looking forward to this. I was like, I get to talk to Beth. It's like the dry life all over again.
I know. Yeah, I mentioned in the introduction that there may be some folks who remember that throwback when we actually co-hosted a podcast together for a summer. But I'm really excited to have you on and really get an update about what you're doing in this space and what is coming up for you, but also for the folks who don't know you and don't know your story to really just tell some good stories. So with that in mind, give the folks listening, if they don't know you, kind of the high notes, who you are, what you do, and then we will dig into your story.
Totally. So my name is Kayla, and I'm probably best known, I guess, for creating 1,000 Hours Dry, which is an online community, but also a challenge. You may also know me from the Reframe app. I worked there for 2 years. I did a lot of their content, social media. You may be familiar with my voice because it's most of the audio on there. And recently I created Join Soberish, which is a community and future platform for people in the recovery space. And I'm trying to think of anything else. Yeah, you may know me from me and Beth's podcast, our podcast, The Dry Life, or my new podcast, Generation Dry. I'm kind of everywhere.
Yeah, as I say, you're quite the CV. You've got a really extensive credentials list in the sober space. So I feel like a lot of folks around here have to know you because of all of the work you've been doing in here. But for maybe the people who know your face, know your voice, but don't know your story, what has been your journey to where you are today?
Yes. Well, I've been trying to think of a way to put it that I haven't repeated before a bunch of times. But I feel like the best way sometimes to tell it is to almost start with where I am now and then go backwards to give a better depiction of how far you can come, and the endless limitations of recovery. And I say recovery specifically because that's what I really consider myself to be in. I'll throw in sobriety, soberish, whatever, other words. But for me, my journey has not really been linear. It hasn't been the typical, I think, traditional abstinence or sobriety journey. What worked for me in year 1 and then what's been working for me and now it's starting year 7 are completely different. But I feel like evolution is necessary in recovery. So, where I'm at now, I just celebrated 6 years of recovery and I know I'm like, what the fuck?
The presenting sponsor of Sober Stories is Lyons Non-Alcoholic Spirits, a spirits company on a quest to replicate and replicate well in as many different alcoholic spirits as possible, allowing us to drink our way. With over 17 spirits, 5 pre-mixed cocktails, and 1 spectacular sparkling wine, all without alcohol, Lyons has become the Sober Stories team's standard for zero-proof drinks that feel festive and celebratory. Sober Stories is a mission-based company. You can find our company's core values right on our About page, and we are committed to partnering with other brands who put people and planet over profit too, which is why we love Lyons. They have a sustainability and social responsibility mission at the forefront of their business, with 100% recyclable packaging and a supply chain that reduces intercontinental freighting, a leading contributor to carbon emissions. They also outline their core values at Lyons, which are mateship, awesomeness, the pay it forward principle, and empowered independence. In our opinion, Lyre's commitment to people and planet makes their sips that much sweeter. Head over to lyres.com and use code SoberStories1010, that's the number 10, the word 10, for 10% off your purchase. Lyres gives you the freedom to drink your way, to not just provide an alternative to those who don't wish to imbibe alcohol, but to ensure that everyone can enjoy the mirth and the merriment of a soiree or shindig.
Honestly, it came at a really turbulent time in my life. Like, I'm going through a separation. So I'm living with my parents currently, which is not fun to celebrate your 6 years or your 30th birthday in the middle of nowhere, so it's been at a time in my life that, I think in the past, I totally would have been like, I'll just go back to my old ways because what's the point? I quit my job. I left behind, not left behind, but, I basically have to completely start over. But rather than looking at it from a negative point of view, just talking to a lot of people about it have been able to really kind of help me to shift to a more growth mindset. Because I think where I started, I would have allowed negative life circumstances to really hinder me, because I'm writing a book, I'm doing, in the middle of, like you, recording podcasts, creating this new platform, and old me would have allowed a really big negative life event to just completely be like, fuck it. I'm going to just, not message my editor back at all. And I'm going to, completely just like stop going to work and not show up for anybody and isolate myself and, probably like text your boyfriend or something. And instead I've really been able to use this as a time to completely reinvest in myself and reevaluate my core values, reevaluate my priorities. And again, I'm saying this because where I came from before and who I was before didn't think about any of these things. I didn't think about, well, wow, I feel like shit right now and I have no motivation to do anything. Like, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm anxious. But in 6 weeks from now, if I don't get my ass to the yoga studio, if I don't go to my therapy, if I don't practice my driving, I'm going to be in the same place I am now or worse. So I have to do it for future me. That's how I think now. I'm able to kind of future cast. Whereas Kayla in active addiction was probably the reason I was in active addiction, because I couldn't think ahead and I also couldn't think outside of my current circumstance. So for me, really, I started semi-young, I don't think, anything crazy, but, 14, 15, right in that middle school, high school age, when I think it's kind of the rite of trespass here in Western cultures to start drinking. But I think like a lot of us also, when I got drunk for the first time, it was that moment. Like that, like, whoa, I have arrived. Like, what's up? This isn't feeling. Like, this is the vibration I want to be on, because it was a time when I felt comfortable in my skin, when I didn't feel the social anxiety that I normally felt. I had been suffering from, and since I was very, very young, anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, which is an anxiety disorder, but I was untreated at the time. So alcohol became self-medicating really quick, but it was really easy to cover up with just high school drinking and then later on college drinking, because once again, that's, especially here in the US, like that's just the culture, that's what's to be expected of us. So for me, it was almost like two levels. I had just my drinking level, which I was already out of control. By the time I graduated high school, I had been suspended. I had underage alcohol citations. I was known by name to the local police. And I can laugh at it now, right? Because it's so far away. But at the time, it was almost like a badge of honor, which is it's so twisted. But I kind of think back to like, what was I watching on TV? Like Bad Girls Club was like my favorite show. And I was like, I'm emulating, we're watching, freaking, what's it called? I remember I was watching like Mob Wives, Jersey Shore. I was like, it's like Jersey Shore, and so you're really emulating what we're watching in the media. And I don't think I realized until like really recently how much it had impacted not just me, but I think our whole generation really. And it became cool to be kind of getting in trouble, and it became cool to, be the one who threw the parties and you knew where everything was at. And, quickly it became my identity. And so I just was the party one, the wild one. And it was easy for me to fit into that, even though it was so separate from all of my other personality traits. But people seem to like this version of me, or so I thought. And so I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to go with. Like, this is who I am, right? Because for me, I grew up moving around a lot. My dad's in the State Department. So I think like a lot of people who move around for whatever reason, you get really comfortable, never settling down. You get comfortable in unstable situations. You don't get super close to people because this is temporary anyways. So like, I know how to make friends quickly. And then I also know how to detach really quickly too. So I keep that distance just naturally because I'm not used to knowing people or staying more than 2 to 3 years in one place. But this time was different. And so it was weird. I had to try and get vulnerable, or, I had to try and fit into these groups of people who had known each other since they were in diapers. And I was a total stranger, and trying to, get into those groups is so hard. And like, that's like the worst time of your life. Like when you're a 14-year-old girl, like so much going on, especially when you have untreated mental health going on top of hormones and body changes and acne and braces and, all the horrible things that I'm so glad I never have to do again. But, for me, it only got worse. Like there was never a time in which I could say, oh, well, my drinking got better for a little while, or I was able to, no. I started strong and I ended strong. I was just 0 to 100, and 100 was always at 100. And really what I kind of would say, what I attribute to that was me getting on benzodiazepines, specifically Klonopin for my panic attacks, because I developed panic attacks at I think I was 19. And for anybody who gets those, obviously, they're terrifying and horrible, and they totally took over my life. And I went through like agoraphobia and just withered away. I lost 20 pounds, and I was already super tiny. And I had to drop out of college for a semester. It really ruined my life. And then they put me on this medication, which is something very great medication for what it's supposed to be used for, right? But it's supposed to be a temporary medication, right? So 2 to 3 months, you were supposed to be on it, going through your exposure therapy, getting your life back together. And then, your SSRIs, or for me, my SRNI was supposed to kick in, and you're supposed to taper off. I never tapered off. I just stayed on them for 5 years. So, I went to college finally, and then I went out of state to college. And so now I'm not only binge drinking, but I'm taking benzos every day, and mixing, which is a very lethal combination and uses the same brain receptors. And so it was automatic blackout every time. I could have 2 drinks, and I at no point, and I don't know why, but I just wasn't putting 2 and 2 together, and it was kind of unfortunate. But it was a situation I kind of related similar to that show. I was it on Hulu? Was it Dope Sick?
I haven't seen that one.
With Michael Keaton. But it was about the opioid epidemic. And it was just one of those situations where for me, like when I went to rehab finally, after like many arrests and many hospitalizations and just really completely crumbling as a person. I mean, I could not get through a day without taking my meds. Like I was abusing them too. Like I wasn't just taking them, I was snorting them. I was, taking more than I needed. I was doctor shopping and going to the urgent care and getting more. And, all I wanted was to not be anxious. Like that was really my intention, was just, I just want to not feel like this. And I had no idea what I was doing was just being a catalyst for more anxiety and worse. And, so I got to this point where I had just ruined all my relationships, gone through friend groups. And I mean, I don't know how you go through all your friends and 30,000 people college, but I managed to do it. I managed to burn a lot of bridges and get kicked out of a lot of bars. And we didn't have that many, so I just, I came to a place where I was court ordered to go to treatment. And so I did. And I'm glad that I did, even though it didn't get me sober. It planted a seed because I was introduced to, at the time, 12 steps, which is how I originally got sober. And it introduced me to other people who drank and used the way I did. And I had never really been around other people who used with the intention that I did. And so it was like going to AA meetings for the first time was, it's so hard to, I don't know. It was just such a good feeling. Like, because I felt seen. I felt heard. And then also this concept, which had never occurred to me before, of course, was that sobriety was cool. You're going and I got sober in LA, which is a big young people's sobriety scene. And of course there's celebrities and it's very glamorous and you get ready for meetings. I mean, like this is a place you go. And even though it sounds kind of silly, right? Because it's like, you're there to recover. You're there to not like, shoot dope and die. But at the same time, what I think was so cool about it was for somebody like me that was 22 years old, I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be at the club. It made sobriety cool because you're going into these meetings and you're seeing these other women who are like so rad and, maybe 5-10 years older than you, and they're dressed cool and they look cool and they're probably smoking cigarettes, which is not cool, but they made it look cool, and they're like, yeah, dude, like sobriety. And you're like, yeah, sobriety. I could do that. And they made it look cool. And that for me was something that I'd never experienced before. And so I left treatment, and I was living with family for a little, and what is now called sober curiosity. Obviously the term was not a thing.
Yeah. We had Ruby Warrington on the podcast, but we're talking about 2018.
Yeah, I'm like in 2015 when dinosaurs roamed the sobriety industry. Before the dinosaurs, I had about a year where I was just like, it's like when you need to break up with somebody or you need to leave a work situation. Yep. Silence, a moment of silence. But you just can't yet. Like there's something holding you, or like for me, what I've found is that like the word is grit, and there's a really good book on it, but it's basically like the positive side of being stubborn. And it's different, but it's a personality trait, and it just means like you're very pretty. You're not going to give up on something. You try hard. But like another good example that they give into the book, and also they did an interview with the author on Hidden Brain, and a really good way she put it was people who are really gritty, versus just like a normal average grit person. Like someone who has too much grit, who is very gritty, will take a test versus someone who's average. And if somebody who doesn't have too much grit will come to a problem that they don't know, and they'll try it for like a couple minutes and they're like, all right, I'll come back to this one, and they'll skip it. And somebody with grit, too much grit, will sit on that problem until it's fucking done. Mm-hmm. And so then you'll go and ding, ding, ding. Okay, class, time in your test. And you're like, fuck, I'm on problem 3. I never got by it because like I there's just something and I get stuck on things. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I felt about the drinking. And I had detox, so I was clean from drugs. And I think that was really important because the benzos are what would have killed me and should have killed me. And I was able to detox from those. And so I was clean, but I wasn't ready to get sober yet. And so I'd have weeks of going out and then I'd go to an AA meeting, and kind of pop my head in, peek around, take a 24-hour chip, or maybe I'd get a week or 2 in, but I just wasn't ready. And then finally, I think what really kind of pushed me over the edge to make the decision was I started dating another addict. And I had never known somebody who was worse than me. And he was way worse. He was, a meth addict, and he had been using meth for like 15 years. And this was a whole nother world. Like, I'm coming from this privileged, upper middle class, regular college, life. Mm-hmm. And then I came into this world of like drug dealers and cartel and gun running and just like completely like I was in a fucking like Lifetime movie or something, mm-hmm. Like we're going to get Mexican food, babe. Okay, like who are we going with? Oh, just this guy from like the cartel or something. Like, oh, casual, like that's cool, but it become normal and some part of my brain, and I think some of us are like this, like I romanticize darkness, or I romanticize, like I idolized Marilyn Monroe mm-hmm. for a really long time, and just other like kind of tragic characters. There was something about tragedy that really sucked me in, because at the time in active addiction, I was like, I really thought I was going to be part of the 27 Club. Like I was for sure. I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it past 27. No, I'm jumping out of cars. I'm like, just who knows? Like at one point I'd overdose, like just, I had no respect for my own life because I didn't love myself. I didn't know how. But anyways, I was dating this guy, and I kind of got a taste of my own medicine. Like not just with being in a relationship with a person in active addiction, but all of the things that come with it as somebody a loved one, right? Like, so he'd be like, hey, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. And then he'd disappear for 3 days. Or one time he was like, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. And he stole my car.
Oh, wow.
And was like, oh, I'm going to go drive to Bakersfield when we're in LA. I'm like, that's like 2 hours away. Like, why? Probably to go get meth. Like, mm-hmm. But that was like my regular life was just like, oh yeah, like casual, you're, don't have a car right now. Like he'll be back. and I just, that was my life. And it got to that point where, I finally, after another night of drinking and getting in a fight, and it wasn't even like my worst night, like it was a bad night, but it wasn't the worst by far. But I think I finally had reached my threshold. And, I tell people now it wasn't my last drink, because over the course of the past 6 years, I've had other drinks, but it was my last drink in the sense that that version of me died that day, because I decided that I could not live like this anymore. Like I was going to end up in a trunk, or I was going to end up shot, or just overdose, and or I was just going to kill myself at that point, because I had no purpose, and I had come so far from this girl who had gotten lacrosse scholarships and was a biology major who was going to go to pre-med. And like, I had all these aspirations. And then here I am in the middle of fucking nowhere in Central California dating a meth addict. And that was, I had nothing else, you know? And so I was like, okay, no, like, this is not how I'm going to go out. And, you know, I drove to an AA meeting, and that was the beginning of what the past, you know, 6 years and now, you know, some odd weeks begun. But yeah, it doesn't, I think when I talk about that life, like, it doesn't even feel like I'm talking about myself anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, knowing you, it doesn't feel like you at all either. It's so
no.
interesting when we meet people in their sobriety, when we're like, you have no idea who I was before. You have no idea what like my life was or how I acted or the way I was, because like that is not the Kayla I know.
No, I love meeting new people, and they know me as like sober, kind of rigid, like quiet, like, and then when you get to know me better, I open up, but I'm definitely a little bit more, you know, quiet when it comes to meeting new people and things like that. I like to observe before I kind of dive in, versus like me and active addiction was like, parties here, buying shots, you know, but then I'm like broken phone and like credit card stolen. And like, I don't know how many North Faces I lost because like I would leave them at the bar, and I'd wake up, hey, gotta call my friends because, you know, Kayla fell asleep in the big house bathroom again. You know, like that was a normal fucking thing for me to do. Oh, Kayla.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that there's so much there that folks are going to relate to, though, because even when we see a version of ourselves that we literally cannot even fathom, that is like so far away from the person we are currently, I think that so much of what you just shared, it sounds like addiction to me. Like, it sounds like active addiction when you were like, that wasn't who I was, like that. And it's like, yeah, your brain was hijacked by chemicals and substances. And like, that sounds like addiction to me. And I know that your journey has continued to evolve and is something that I admire the way you do things, because it looks like a living document to me. Like, your version of recovery is something that is not rigid. It is something that evolves and it flows. And I mean, when I say not rigid, I mean in like the opposite of that, of like flow. Like, you really do truly flow with what feels right in that season and that stage of life. So for those who are unfamiliar with this term soberish, can you tell us like what that means to you and what this space is kind of starting to look like for you?
Yeah. So I would say over the last maybe 3 years, I've really had a new awakening to what recovery meant to me. Because in the beginning, I started my sobriety journey in the rooms of, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous. And that space will always hold a special place in my heart. You know, there are things I would change about it.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's a story for another time. Anyways, my point is, what got me sober wasn't going to keep me sober. Not for forever. Because we're all unique individuals. We evolve, hopefully, we're supposed to, right? And so as I evolved in my sobriety, I needed more. I needed more than just meeting and listening to somebody's story. I needed more than just doing the steps over and over. I loved being of service. I loved taking commitments. I loved community, but I needed to learn more. I needed to understand more, and I wasn't getting that there. So I kind of had to step out on my own, which is hard because at the time I was ostracized for it. So I was kind of, a lot of my friends kind of dropped me under the assumption that, oh, she's going to go out and relapse because she's not, running a program in the proper way.
Yeah.
And that's why I created, 1,000 Hours Dry and the Dry Club, because I was looking and hoping to find other individuals who didn't drink, but who didn't necessarily run a traditional program. Mm-hmm. And then I realized there's so many people out there who either A, were already doing that, or B, desired to do that, but didn't know how to because there wasn't anything else available. And there were smaller groups, Smart Recovery, things like that, just starting to come into the picture. But for me, like I was in LA, and like, if you know LA, like the closest Smart Recovery meeting was in the Valley. Like, you're not going to catch me going to the Valley. So like option B,
the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Just, don't get me wrong. I will cross mountains for my recovery, but that's a really fucking big mountain when you live in LA. It's a really big, far fucking mountain. Okay. So I was going to try and find something else first. Okay. And I still had some friends in the program. And so, I was going to therapy at the time. I was going back to school. I was, really into fitness. So I had really kind of created my own toolbox before I even really knew what that was. And it was working really well for me. But like I said, I evolved. I started to read a lot of books. I started to kind of question the idea, is alcoholism a disease? I don't know. I don't think so. I didn't really have a higher power. I kind of was like, never felt, thought I was talking to God, but like, I never really felt like I was talking to anybody. Like, is that normal? Like, it felt kind of fake, or inauthentic, or like I was doing something wrong. And so that evolved, right? And then I created 1,000 Hours Dry, and this community really dedicated to alcohol-free lifestyle, which it still is. And then that opened up to, the sober curious, because what I had realized over time and talking to so many people is, the same thing that I went through. Not everybody is ready right away. Yeah. Like, you might kind of want to dip your toe in. Some people totally, just dive in the deep end. And some of us need to, go and then in the little kiddie pool first and kind of, get our toes wet, and then, wait till the water's right and go on and slowly. But that's kind of what I started to recognize, was just this idea of binary recovery, which was what was taught, to me in treatment and in 12 steps. And what I truly believed at the time, it started to that belief started to kind of break down, and its foundation, it didn't really make sense to me anymore. And so I was like, I don't know what I believe anymore, but I know that I don't believe this. And so over the last, I'd say 3 years of my recovery, a lot of it has been spent doing a lot of research and service in like the harm reduction community. And that was a big step, I think, that we took at Reframe, that was doing something different, was giving people the cutback track. And it's like, whoa, like, is that a good idea? And you're like, maybe not. But you know what? I think what we realized when, you were there was, it's going to get a lot of people in the door
entry point
that are that are not going to come in or even get close if you're just giving one option, which is abstinence. So that opened up my mind a lot, because at the time I was running all the community meetings and I'm talking to all these people. And what I'm realizing is, moderation works for a ton of people. Like, not everybody who has, a problem with drinking has an alcohol use disorder. Yeah. And not every person who has an alcohol use disorder needs to be sober. Like, we all drink for so many different reasons. And especially like with COVID, so many people had habitual problems that didn't require abstinence. And those are things that I had never considered, So moving forward, I just kept trying to be more and more open-minded to this idea of everybody's journey looks different, and maybe mine does too. Like, what does mine really look like? Am I sober for not, I don't want to say the right reasons, but like, why am I sober? Because sometimes I'd ask myself, like, am I sober just because of like who I am? Like, because people expect that from me with 1,000 Hours Dry and reframing stuff. Like, what if I wanted to start drinking again? Like, would that even be possible to do? Like, you know, or would I have to live this double life because this is not the identity that the public sees me as? But then I think that I made it really clear the first time I drank, by being really open about it, that I'm going to do things my way because I always have. And that's what works for me. And that's why I say recovery and not sobriety, or not, you know, 6 years of abstinence, because that's not my story. I've drank a handful of times. And now I microdose, or actually I'm finding out I am mini dose because I take 3 milligrams apparently, you know, with mushrooms. And I've been experimenting with kava, which does not work for me. I like the way it feels, but like people, I don't know. It's definitely an alcohol alternative. I'll give you that. But like for me, it gives me gnarly ass, basically hangovers, which I was like, no, why might as well drink? Like, you know, and I don't think that's forever. I think a lot of people, it works for a lot of people. So I don't want to like hate on it, but beforehand, I would not have, you know, even like, whoa, no, like anything, like even CBD in the beginning, like I was like, I will not take CBD. It's too close to THC. Like it might get me high. And now I'm like, I take CBD, like, you know, and I'm so much more open to this idea of harm reduction in general. Like, you know, I have friends that take naltrexone, which I never took, but like, I think if I had to now, I totally would. I can think of a ton of people I know who would totally benefit from it. And
I have clients who use it, and it's a game changer for a lot of them.
It's crazy. And this whole idea, and I love it. And shout out to Dank Recovery, like, because it's such a funny ass page, but then they'll just like post these random serious posts about like harm reduction is rad. And all their audience gets so mad because they're like, fuck people on methadone, they're not really sober. And I'm like, fuck you. If it keeps a needle out of your arm, you're in recovery, man. Like, you know,
for people who don't know what harm reduction is, can you give them a synopsis?
So I think, you know, it can be a lot of things for a lot of different people, but I think you just have to think about literally what it is. We're reducing the harm that we're doing to ourselves. So for one person, harm reduction could look like this one guy that I have met here in Ohio while I've been here, and actually got him on the Reframe app, which I think has been helpful for him. But he was telling me he was drinking like, you know, like a bottle a day, like a full handle a day.
Of liquor?
I mean, of liquor. Yeah. And now he says he takes probably maybe like 6 to 10 shots a day. Like, to me, that's recovery. That's harm reduction. Okay. This man has gone from taking, I don't even know how many shots. I know there's like 17 shots in a fifth. So I don't even know how many shots are in a full.
It makes my stomach hurt a little bit.
But to me, that's progression. Why are we not celebrating that? Like, and for him, he was telling me, he's like, you know, my goal is to get to like 4 to 5 shots a day. Like, that's my goal. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, is that a lot? Is that moderation? No. But from what he was doing, that's harm reduction. You know, giving people a place to get clean needles instead of reusing dirty ones and getting Hep C or giving Hep C to somebody else. You know, that's harm reduction. Giving people a place to test their drugs, because we're going to do them anyways. When you're a drug addict, hate to break it to you, but if you're going to take my drugs, like, or if when I was in active addiction, like, there was nothing that was going to stop me from getting high. Like it just wasn't, and not even getting high, just functioning. I needed them to function. So like, if you were to tell me like, there might be something in here, but I'm not sure, but that was my only option. Like, I'm going to fucking take that chance because I already know what withdrawal looks like and no thanks.
Right. And how do we make that less dangerous for people?
Exactly. So why are other countries doing it and we are not, which is these spaces to go to test your drugs for fentanyl and, you know, other shit that they put in there, God knows. And I think in the drinking space, that looks like cutting back and that looks like just drinking less than you were drinking before. Right. And making space for people to recover in a way that works for them and allows them to heal and allows them to be safe or safer than they were before. And I think those are all wins. And I think we really need to stop and get away from this idea of binary, like sobriety is binary, recovery is binary.
Still in it in some ways.
There's nothing in the world. Hello. Like literally, like look at gender now, look at sexuality, look at literally everything. Like there's nothing. Look at the color blue. Do you know how many blues are in a crayon box now? Just saying, like literally nothing, like name one thing on a planet that's binary. Like, please email me, text me. I will say I'm wrong, but I'm not.
Some science nerd is going to totally stomp you on this, but I hear what you're saying.
But no, but even think about it. Even the whole like gender thing, like the most conservative person, you could just be like, well, technically no, because there's intersexual people. So that makes 3 at least. So there's not 2. Sorry. Like from a totally scientific perspective, not even getting into like the political side. That's it.
Right.
You know, so it just doesn't make sense. And this all kind of started, and I'm going to be talking about it in my book. I'm touching on it, but because I've been having to do a lot of research on it, it kind of all started with the prohibition and then the movement coming after it, which was AA and the Temper movement or Tempest movement. And people getting this idea in their heads that you have to be this fall down, drunk, that kind of, like Bill in the Big Book for anybody who is unfamiliar. He's the one who wrote it. But his story is kind of the story you think of, like the alcoholic, this guy who had this great life and then he fucked it up by drinking and was getting hospitalized and could not keep his shit together and had to, drink to wake up in the morning and live his life. And the most hilarious part about all of that is that he came up with AA after dropping LSD. Like he got sober and then he was messing around with psychedelics. And then created AA, and then people in AA were like, nah, we're going to leave that part out. Like, that's kind of important, but like, that's like a sidebar note, but
there's so much history and context about it. They're like, oh, that would be important to know. That would be useful to know.
You're like, no, we're not. We're taking all of this out, erasing it because it doesn't fit in our narrative of complete abstinence. So, but my point being, right, that Bill is just one kind of alcoholic. Just like I am, just like you were, just like anybody else is, whatever you want to call it, right? And alcoholic's not even a correct term anymore. But you know what I mean, right? Like we all drink differently, so the way we should treat it is different. Well, I think that's
one of the things that I have noticed today, but also just noticed about you, is that like I really appreciate how specific you are about language and how you say things like substance use disorder, or alcohol use disorder versus addiction or versus alcoholism and recovering, like very specific and nuanced language, because I think that is just one more way that we open more doors for people. That's one more way that we give more access to this and say there really isn't one right way to do this. And at the same time, we're removing shame from it, because I think obviously this binary that we've had for so long, and this very this very unnuanced, what's the opposite of nuance? This very like stayed version
Old school.
old school, like iteration of what it means to be a person who doesn't drink has held so many of us back for so long. And that's really a lot that we're doing here. And I'm curious for somebody who might be listening to this and says, oh, wow, Kayla was sober, quote unquote, totally sober, abstinent, and now she's sober-ish. Yeah. Like how do you discern what feels like it is in alignment with your recovery versus what is not in alignment with your recovery as far as using substances?
Totally. So the way that I think about it and the way that I tell people when they ask me, because especially when it comes to like microdosing, I totally am a big proponent of microdosing. For somebody who's never actually done, like, I've never like shroomed. Yeah. Like, I'm totally into the mini microdosing. But if you caught me like 3 years ago, I would have been like, nah. Like, you can literally watch my Jubilee thing. And I was against marijuana. And now I'm like, marijuana maintenance for sure. Do it. Yeah. You gotta, but I also said in that video too, I was like, watch, I'm going to change my mind in a couple years and I won't think this anymore. So like, I always disclaim myself. But really the way that I think about it, and the way that I'm kind of thinking about Soberish too, is like, it's a play on the word sober, right? Like ish. It's kind of this idea, like the fact, like I'm bisexual, right? So like I'm straightish, I'm gayish, I'm not really anything. I'm just hanging in the middle, getting left out of everything. And that's kind of how I felt about my sobriety for a little when I was or allotting myself, I said, for me, perfectionism doesn't work. And giving myself this rigid abstinence is kind of making me think about drinking more than I think I should. Maybe I'll allot myself maybe like one day a year or something to have a cocktail if I so desire. And that works for me because I usually will have it. I'll have a couple drinks and nothing will happen. And it won't be that great. And then it kind of just solidifies my foundation the next day. Maybe I have a hangover. Maybe I don't. And then I'm like, all right, well, this is why I don't drink because it really wasn't that great. Do
you have any red flags that you would look for like when you're considering when to drink, how to drink, what that looks like for you?
Totally. I think it goes back to your original question, which is for me, it's intention, right? Like, what is my intention behind doing anything really? Like not just drinking. I have to watch this as somebody who has like comorbid disorders. So I'll give like examples for some people. So I have, obviously I feel I have recovered from an alcohol use disorder as well as substance abuse disorder. So technically it gets fucking confusing, right? Because like, am I in remission? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Not recovering. You have recovered. Again, that nuance in the language.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I should have maybe said like 6 years. I have been recovered 6 years. But anyways, right? Maybe I'll change it. It's this idea really that in my eyes, I have done the work. I have put in the work. I have done the therapy. I have found the root cause. I have addressed the root cause. And I have moved forward from the reason that I was drinking. I no longer have that. I mean, I still suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder, but I take my medication. I go to therapy. I use movement. I have a meditation practice. I have a mindfulness practice, right? So an intention would be, right, like I microdose. So every morning I get up 5 days a week and I take my little microdose mushrooms and they don't get you high. Sorry. You'd have to take all of them probably. And that would be a waste of your money. And I feel a little better, but what it does behind the scenes and what I'm really using it for is the neuroplasticity. It helps your brain rewire itself. So for me, I am currently doing EMDR therapy, which just a short blurb about that for anybody who is unfamiliar. It's a type of therapy that helps you learn how to reassociate negative situations in your life. It's really good for PTSD. It's really good for anxiety. It's really good for panic attacks. So for me, my brain right now is relearning how to do a lot of things and reassociating things. Like I'm trying to reassociate that my car is not bad and it's not scary to drive because I'm, relearning how to expose myself to that. So what the mushrooms do is they help my brain create those new neural pathways quicker than if it was just me doing it with the therapy. It also helps with my depression. Immediately within the first couple of weeks of me doing it, my partner at the time noticed. He was like, your mood is significantly better. You have not been so negative, because I'm a negative ass Nancy normally.
No.
And no, not me. I'm just, a lot of us are like, if you've ever read the happiness hypothesis, like we have different, we're born with different kind of bottom lines, I guess.
Straightforward. That's all.
So yes, but some of us are more, prone to being optimistic, and some of us are more prone to being pessimistic. Me on the pessimistic side, not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but just naturally tend to be more of a Debbie Downer. And the microdosing really has helped me shift my perspective to not hyper focus so much on the negative shit, because guess what? There's always going to be negative shit and there's always going to be positive stuff. So for me, my intention is not, oh, great, I can't wait to wake up this morning and take these gummies that don't really make me feel any certain type of way specifically. But it's like, it's the whole idea of like, oh yeah, can't wait to get high on my medication, my SSRIs. Like, yeah, you're going to feel something different in 4 to 6 weeks. Hey, So it's a long-term thing. And I think if I were to go, oh man, I'm having such a shit day, I'm not going to take 3 gummies today. I think I'm going to take like 6 gummies and see what happens. That would be me misusing them, right? Like this is no longer aligned with my recovery and my reason for taking these. So same thing happens really with anything. I think, exercising is another one. I have orthorexia. So I'm still in and recovering, trying to from that eating disorder. And so I have to be really careful. And for anybody, and it's a weird one, it just basically means I have an unhealthy obsession with eating healthy. And if I don't eat healthy, I punish myself by not eating later or by over-exercising. And so like recently I had an injured vertebrae in my neck, and I had a rib cage out of place from over-exercising so much. And then, they tell you like, well, if you're not going to rest, your body's going to rest for you. So I have not been working out the last couple of weeks, and it's really I've had to shift once again my toolbox. But my point was, my intention behind working out sometimes would no longer be a sanctuary, a place to lower my anxiety, a place to go to practice movement and to get out of my head and to ground myself. It became a place to punish myself for eating food. Like, you know what I mean? It's so fucked up, but like, that's just how my brain works. So I have to look when I'm going to the gym and go, all right, what's my intention behind exercising today? Is it because I'm really looking forward to this yoga flow and I really love this teacher and I can't wait for that 3 minutes of savasana at the end of the class? Or am I going because I had like 3 cookies last night and I'm trying to, burn more calories off? That's not a good reason to go work out, Yet again, your intention. Why are you posting something on Instagram, right? Like, and especially I think for us ladies, like I post some very provocative pictures, and not to say if you post provocative pictures and you're all about it and that's you and that makes you feel good, then that is totally cool. But I wasn't doing it for that reason. I was doing it because I liked the attention I was getting. I liked the external validation that I was getting. And so my intention, yet again, right, behind doing something was not in alignment with me recovering and me being independent and valuing myself. It was me looking for external validation, me looking for something outside of myself, you know? So I just have to do what aligns with my intentions. And I have to ask myself, I have to be aware. I think a lot of us in recovery have to be very self-aware, because it's very easy to slip back into old habits, or not even habits, but like just sometimes, you know, catching yourself having way too much coffee because you like that up feeling, or, you know,
as I'm still drinking iced coffee in the afternoon.
No,
Call me out,
like,
Kayla.
me too.
Why don't you?
Like, sorry, dude, it's even later for me, but hey, it's decaf. Like, but you have to be hyper aware. And so I'll talk to people now who ask, you know, for, especially with Soberish, because it's so, and that's the whole thing. It's just ironic. Like, it's not really a label, but you can label it. You can do whatever you want with it. That's the whole point. You know, I think when it comes to drinking, you have to go into it like somebody who doesn't have an alcohol use disorder goes into it. They don't go into it with the intention of, I'm really gonna have this drink because I feel like shit and I'm stressed out and my, you know, partner's bitching at me and I just need to chill out. So that's not the right reason to drink. You could have a drink because, hey, you know what? I had a great day. I just feel like having a cocktail. So I'm going to make one.
You know, and I think the intention part is such a good call out. And I think that if we can keep that as the thing in mind, because for me, if I think about the intention behind my own alcohol use, there's not a realm of possibility where I wouldn't drink a glass of wine just to drink a glass of wine. I would always do it to escape. Like, there's no realm of or any possibility where I go back to using alcohol in some way and it doesn't just end up exactly where it was. Like, and I think that when we think about where our paths are and what that looks like for us, and if it is something that evolves like yours does, or if it is not something like mine's pretty staid, I think the things that come up for me are like, know thyself and what your intention are. And like, there never was a time in my life where my intention was to do anything but escape. Like, that was like, wanted to be drunk. I drank to get drunk. I always drank to escape. I love the feeling of being drunk. Like, there's no realm of drinking that is just like having a glass of champagne on New Year's Eve. Like, and because I always know what my intention has always been, what my history has always been using this substance. So I think that this idea of intention is really important, and to really know why we're using a substance, what it's there for. And one of the things I love about the Soberish realm, though, too, is like a caveat from that is also like microdosing mushrooms doesn't get you high. But it doesn't align with quote unquote sobriety. It doesn't fit in the box that has been created. And so it's excluding a lot of people to have this one box when they might be using something as a tool and they're not using it to get high. They're just using it as something that supports them and maybe even helps them be sober from alcohol, or, you know, and I think that when we create more spaces for more people to make a better lifestyle choice and to reduce the harm of whatever substance that they're using, or whatever their substance of use is, or whatever they're overusing or misusing, I think that just is, I think that makes more space for more people. So I love what you are doing. I could talk about this with you all day long. The last question that I always ask every interview, and I think I know the answer for you because I know you're writing a book, but if your story were to be titled something, what would it be titled and what kind of book would it be?
So I'm going to throw a twist at you. It wouldn't be the book that I'm writing now.
Okay.
Because the book I'm writing now is not a memoir. It's a guide.
Yes.
My book would probably be like, How Are You Alive? Like,
is this a comedy or is this is this dark?
It's like a dark comedy, like almost like
okay.
It's like a question mark, like, how are you alive? Like, question mark. And I think it just, for me, it speaks to when I look back at all of the crazy ass shit that I did, all the dangerous situations that I put myself in, all the shit I was consuming and putting in my body, like, not only that, right? And I go like, wow, like I'm here. So like I must have a purpose. And it, for me, that's kind of how I connected with my higher power, which is just the universe. Like I don't necessarily believe in a specific organized religion or a God, but shit, like for sure, I'm here for something, because there were many, many times when I should not have woken up, or I should not have gotten up. Or if I'd stayed on the path that I was on, I would have been the trunk girl for sure. Like, no, like I say that now so casually, but I literally had to, I was in a situation where like a psycho situation with somebody who was if I can't have you, nobody can. And I had to, the police had to be called many times. So, for me, it's kind of like that. I have to be able to kind of like laugh at that now. Otherwise it's fucking depressing and like really dark. But I think the juxtaposition is like, look where I'm at now. Like, what a joke. Like, a publishing company came to me and asked me to write a book. Like, why? Like, why me? Or like, help you, and you and I both, like, helping to create this like $350 million company. I dropped out of school twice. Like, who the fuck am I to be doing anything? Why is anyone asking me for advice? Literally, I'm the worst. Like,
no.
But I'm the best at being the worst, right? Like queen. So, but it's just so funny how, like you said, you get to start over. Like, I like to tell people, like, I've lived 2 lives, basically. And so that's kind of why I think it would be like a dark comedy, or like, I think it would make like a really great like TV show. I mean, it would have to be on like HBO. Totally. But it would totally be great. And I already know who I would want to play.
Oh, who's
I forget
gonna play
her name. Fuck, so I forget her name, but she was in Big Little Lies. The girl that played Reese Witherspoon's daughter, the cute girl with the blonde curls. She's done a bunch of other stuff, but I don't know.
I've seen Kirsten
Dunst. Everyone thinks I look like Kirsten Dunst, but she's like older than me, so she can't play me.
That. Yeah,
but. Anyways,
well,
it would.
We'll IMDb that and put it in the show notes.
Hey, girl, if you're listening to this, like,
we have an idea.
But only because, like you said, I am writing a book, which is going to be called Soberish. That's the main title, not the subtitle. The subtitles kind of we're working on, because I didn't know I needed a subtitle. Apparently, I do. But that is more. This is going to be more of a guide, kind of. I'm going to give you some background on how we got here as a society with alcohol. And then I'm going to kind of guide you through some nuanced ideas, some nuanced tools, resources. I'm going to be talking with some really cool experts who are going to be in the book. I did a case study, so I'm going to be having experiences from real other people in the book as well. And it's also going to be interactive. So there's going to be exercises to do, prompts and stuff. So I'm really excited about it because there's nothing else kind of like it. I guess you're going to call it Quitlet, right? And I don't think anybody our age has written any Quitlet. And so I think it's going to be, the audience is definitely more millennial, Gen Z, but I think it kind of goes back to what I said before about prevention. So if we can start hitting people at a younger age, that's cool. There's not to like hate on anybody who's older, but y'all already got a lot of Quitlet, okay? Like, so like we need some for like the younger people and people, coming in college. I want to speak to those, those people that are in college that are feeling the way that I felt, who thought that you couldn't get sober in college. I want to speak to those high schoolers, I want to speak to those people right out of college. I want to speak to everybody, but like really, once again, going back to how can we be more inclusive, or how can we make what's missing? Right. I felt like this was missing. So I'm
Do we
excited.
Have a release date?
So it's September of next year.
Wow.
That might change. It just depends. There's so much that goes into it, dude. Like
I can't even imagine.
I was like, what am I signing up for? Like, this is exciting. And I was like, nah, like this is a lot. like I literally just did a training to be a Spang instructor. And I'm like, I think I'm going to drop out now. Cause like, this is I've too much going on. I just interviewed with a new company. I'm really excited about if I get the job, like obviously everyone's going to know. I'll put it in my bio. It'll be cool. But there's yet again, right? There's more to be unfolding. This is year 7 for me. I just turned 30, like 30 and flirty and thriving. Like,
I love it.
know, I'm single again. Like I don't know. It's a new era with Soberish. I think at the end of the day, if we can save more people, I think really that's all that matters, you know?
Yes.
And so if like, I'll end on this, like the page has only been up for like, I don't know, a week. And I already got a message from a girl and she was like, hey, I'm really thankful for this page and this idea. You know, I've been trying to get sober, but I haven't been able to. But ever since I kind of stumbled upon this page and this idea of being soberish, I've actually been able to drink less alcohol.
Wow.
And that was so cool to me. That's it. You know, like, but that's it. That's all you need. Like you said, language is so important and just holding space for people.
Opening
and we're
doors.
We're going to start meeting soon as well. So
amazing.
I'm really excited to just hold space, be of service, and probably pissing people off. Cause I know that's when we're doing something right.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and I've always admired you for the space holding and the community building that you do, because that truly, like, you really truly do live being of service to others and having that as part of your recovery. So I know our people are going to want to connect with you. I know they're going to want to know what you're up to, how to connect with Soberish. How do they find you? Where are you on the internet? What do you have going on in your world?
Yes. So you can find me a couple of places. Hate to break it to you, but my personal Instagram is really boring. I don't post there very much. But you can just search Kayla Lyons. It'll be under Kayla Lyons because the person who was Kayla Lyons is inactive and would not give me their...
I have the same problem with Beth Bowen. I'm like, babes, like, I'll pay you. I just need it.
Name your cost.
I know.
Or just Kayla. Just Kayla. That's fine too.
Yeah. I know. I've tried to.
But you can just find under Kayla Lyons. And then Soberish is just at Join Soberish. I'm active there. I'm hosting there on Wednesdays. And then I have a group of really awesome women who are hosting there as well. And all of us have different recovery paths and different backgrounds. So you can kind of, once again, go there and see who you connect with. And then I also hold my own podcast with my co-host, Leah. And that is under Generation Dry. You can find it on any platform, and those episodes drop on Sunday. And it's not necessarily a sobriety podcast in the way that me and Beth was. Leah is a licensed clinical social worker like Beth. And so we really talk about a lot of mental health, a lot of definitely we touch on sobriety and stuff, but I found what I think is also missing is, like, there's so much stuff for the newcomer, but like, what about people who've been in recovery? Like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how much of my feed is the same fucking thing, dude. Yeah. And it's because we taught everybody how to use Canva, and now I kind of regret it, but
literally,
everyone, literally. But, you know, it's kind of that next level, like, you know, I know alcohol is a carcinogenic. I know this, I know that. I want to know the next level. I want to know, once I get past the 3-month mark, what's next? 6 months, year. How do I maintain this? That's what we're talking about there. That's stuff like cognitive distortions and relationships. We just dropped an episode on loneliness because that shit's real right now. Especially at our age, you know? So I'm just
amazing
swearing.
All right.
Like I am everywhere else.
y'all can go dig into the archives of The Dry Life and find some co-hosted episodes with me and Kayla way back in the day, probably
so
like
good.
last summer, 2 summers ago. I don't even, what is time?
I think,
but Kayla, this has been
good. There's
such a
some
treat.
good shit.
There's some good shit in there. And we've had some really great guests on there too. So y'all go dig into the archives there. But Kayla, this has been so much fun. It is so good to catch up and hear about what you are building and continue to build. And I know that we are all going to be waiting for the release of Soberish. But in the meantime, y'all connect with Kayla on Join Soberish. I almost said joinsoberish.com. I give you a webpage, but at Join Soberish. Kayla, thank you so much for your time today.
Always.